The White House is warning a Russian invasion of Ukraine could happen at, quote, any point. Tensions between the two countries have been intensifying for several months now. More than 100,000 Russian troops remain near the border with Ukraine. President Biden has tried diplomacy with Russian President Vladimir Putin to de-escalate the conflict, but talks between the two leaders failed due to disagreements over Ukraine's potential NATO status. For more on this, I want to bring in Daniel Treisman. He's a political science professor at my alma mater, UCLA, go Bruins, and a research fellow at Stanford University's Center for Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences. Daniel, thank you for making some time for us today. First, remind us how Russia and Ukraine got to this point.
It really started in 2015 when, at the end of a brief, very violent civil war between separatists in the east of Ukraine and the Ukrainian government forces, an accord was signed called the Minsk Accord. This froze the conflict, but neither side has fully complied with the conditions of that treaty. And in the years since then, the Ukrainian military has been becoming stronger, modernizing its forces and engaging more and more in joint exercises with NATO, naval exercises with the US. And I think Putin has reached the conclusion that this trend is working against Russia's interests, that at some point relatively soon, Ukraine may feel strong enough to try to take back the Donbass, this area, disputed area, by force. So he has, as we've seen, placed 100,000 troops roughly on the border with Ukraine. He's increased signals of all kinds that Russia is prepared to take military action, and that's where we are today.
Now, we always have to compare what Russia says and what it does. Last week, U.S. intelligence warned that Russia had been creating a, quote, pretext for invasion by utilizing a false flag operation. Explain what Russia was supposedly doing and now how it's responding to this accusation.
A false flag operation is when government sends in operatives, intelligence operatives, to prepare an attack that will then be blamed on the opposing side. So these operatives, intelligence operatives with explosives and urban warfare training were supposedly placed in eastern Ukraine, presumably to stage an attack on the Russian proxy forces, the separatists in Donbass, which could then justify a Russian military invasion. Russia, of course, denies this, as we would expect it to do. But we have the intelligence from the US side that this team was in place. And of course, if Russia were planning an invasion, we can't say that for absolute certainty yet. But if it is, then that would be a very natural thing to do, to try to create some kind of pretext for a justifiable invasion.
Now, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan spoke about the situation between Russia and Ukraine this past Sunday on CBS's Face the Nation. Here's just some of that conversation.
We're ready either way. If Russia wants to move forward with diplomacy, we are absolutely ready to do that in lockstep with our allies and partners. If Russia wants to go down the path of invasion and escalation, we're ready for that too, with a robust response that will cut at their strategic position.
But let's present a reality check. The U.S. just ended its longest war. So what might be part of this robust response, as the White House says it, that they're referring to?
Well, the White House has been careful deliberately to leave that somewhat vague. On the one hand, there are economic sanctions, and it's fairly clear what that might include. Cutting off major Russian banks from the international dollar-denominated financial system, perhaps, various other sanctions against individuals and perhaps whole sectors. But then there are additional measures which I believe Jake Sullivan described as measures that would seriously affect Russia's military strategic position in Europe. What exactly that means, we don't know, but presumably increased armament, deployment of weapons in the NATO members within Europe, discussions with other NATO members about changing plans for defense against Russia. And it's also possible that would include deployment of missiles. Russia is very concerned about long-range missiles in the states bordering Russia. But this is all speculation. We don't know what exactly that would involve. The White House is concerned to make sure that Russia believes that this would be something very significant.
Now, this raised a lot of eyebrows. President Biden sent CIA Director Bill Burns to Kiev last week. Burns is also the former ambassador to Russia. So what was the purpose of this trip, and are we even meant to know what is taking place, what he may have done?
I think the trip was deliberately kept quite secret, under the radar. The main purpose was probably both to reassure Ukraine that the U.S. stands by it, and secondly, to coordinate and to obtain the latest information from Zelensky, President Zelensky, and others in Ukraine about what exactly Russia may be planning. Clearly, it wasn't meant as a PR action, since they kept it quite quiet. But it seems reasonable that it would also send a signal to Moscow that the U.S. is committed, if not, well, we know that the U.S. is committed not to send troops, but the U.S. is committed to be very involved in helping Ukraine to resist and to fight back against any Russian action.
So that's more of like a covert effort. On the overt effort, Secretary of State Antony Blinken will meet with Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov this Friday in Geneva. What are you expecting out of that meeting?
He has a bit busy week planned, in fact, because on Wednesday he's supposed to meet with President Zelensky, then on Thursday with the foreign ministers of France and Germany, and then on Friday with Sergey Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister. I think this is really just an attempt to come up with some kind of diplomatic way forward that would avoid war. It's late in the day. Russia has made very clear its determination to change the status quo. It's not clear what Putin might in the end settle for, and Blinken has to walk a tightrope. On the one hand, exploring possible diplomatic openings, while at the same time not giving up important commitments that the U.S. has made, and not changing, not even throwing into question the U.S.'s solid commitments to its allies in NATO and to its friends in Europe, such as Ukraine. So I think it's always good to keep talking, and while you keep talking, it's less likely that a military action would actually begin. So I think he's doing what a good diplomat has to do, and keeping the conversation going, exploring, and hoping that something more valuable in the long term will come out of it.
A delicate diplomatic dance, and the stakes are very high. Daniel Treisman, thank you very much for speaking with us today.
Thank you.